Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to your Wednesday night webinar brought to you by NOCD. My name is Dr. Patrick McGrath. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer for NOCD. If you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, check us out at nocd.com. That's NOCD.com. We work with people in the US and Canada and Australia and the UK, and we take lots of insurances, and we're always working on taking more of them. So let us know if there's any assistance that we can provide. Got some questions coming in already, so the first one comes from Jack. Jack says, Dr. McGrath, I'm really struggling. I've learned that whenever an obsession shows up, I have to allow it to be there and move on. So you do. Great. However, the anxiety doesn't decrease and you can't, stop focusing on it. You feel like you need to distract yourself. And Jack, as long as that feeling's there and you do distract yourself, then you're going to keep having those feelings. So it's going to come to a point where who wins, right? This is a war of attrition in some ways. Do you give in or does the OCD give in? The OCD won't give in, just so you know, Jack. So then it comes to a point of, are you going to keep giving in? Or are you going to say, all right, OCD, I get it. Your job is to make me anxious. My job is to not care about it, right? Not to try to distract myself from it, not to try to get rid of it or something like that, not to try to fix it. And yes, it's going to feel unbearable because OCD will always go to the level of it feeling unbearable so that you will do a compulsion, because OCD has one thing and one thing only that it wants you to do, which is to do a compulsion. So as long as OCD knows that it can get you to a certain level where you will do a compulsion, then you are going to do the compulsion. That is what is going to happen. So, Jack, it comes down to this. When will you decide that though you feel uncomfortable, you aren't going to do something about it from a compulsion side? Instead, you're just going to allow that to be there and learn that you can handle it. I hope you get there. You can get there. It is possible. Beth said, lousy day today. Lost your dad 4 years ago today. That stinks. Sorry. Oh, it's 5 days for my wife passing away too 3 years ago. What do you know, Beth? We share something kind of close. You can't go to his grave. Beth, you can go to his grave. You choose not to go to his grave, I just want to say. But you absolutely can go to his grave. And the event you went to 2 years ago today, Miss Crustacean Pageant. Sounds like a group of crabby people. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Lobster jokes coming to you today. Oh, that was another one. Anyway, yes, crustacean jokes all around. You handed out info on crab care for years before COVID. Your brother's there doing the thing that you love because you can't get past this fear. Well, I like what you say here, but one day of fun could rob you of your health forever. And also, Beth, not going out and living your life will also rob you of your living your life forever. So in the end, Beth, you're choosing to have the very fear become part of your life, right? Which is to not live life. By not going out and not doing things, you're doing exactly what you think COVID would do to you if you were to get COVID. So in reality, you're living as if you have long COVID, even though you don't, and you're living that way out of a fear of what if you do. So just know, everyone, that can be helped. We don't have to live as if the fear is 100% absolutely going to happen. Is it possible? Sure. But remember, in OCD, we confuse possibility and probability. And OCD says possibility equals 100% probability. But that's just simply not the case. And if it was, well, all of us would be pretty screwed, just so you know. Chris says, is it possible to have an SUD, specifically alcoholism, without a genetic predisposition? Of course. Yes. I mean, there may be people who start to drink for myriads of reasons and develop a tolerance and then develop an addiction to alcohol. It doesn't mean that they have to have a genetic predisposition for it. It's higher likelihood if you have a genetic predisposition for it, but it's not mandatory to have it. Just like with OCD also. If you have genetic predispositions, like if you have a first-degree relative with OCD, then what do we know? Your chance of having it is higher than if you don't have relatives. But if you don't have any relatives with OCD, you still have a chance of having OCD. So you don't have to have that genetic predisposition. Love is 515 says, I have never really heard of anyone with your OCD. It has to do with OCD constantly telling you not to buy things or eat things or use things or order things because something bad will happen to my family. Just know that that has been treated numerous times by myself and people that I know too. So it is not a new kind of OCD. It is not a new subtype. It is a very common one, actually. And maybe we haven't talked about it much, but I will tell you that lots of people would put this into the magical thinking realm. So maybe we haven't called it exactly what you've described it here, but definitely would go into the realm of magical thinking, where the belief is that if I do this thing, that it will somehow lead to something else happening. So if I eat, let's say, crackers with butter and garlic on them, my grandmother will die, right? And so therefore, even though I love crackers with butter and garlic on them, I will not eat them because I want my grandmother to live, right? Now, when my grandmother dies, at least I will be able to say I had nothing to do with it because I didn't eat any crackers with butter on them and garlic. But then OCD will say, but maybe you did and you don't know it. What if you slept walk and you went to your kitchen and you got out crackers and you got out the garlic in the jar and you got out some butter and you ate one while you were sleeping and you didn't even know that you did it, and that's why your grandmother died, and it could be your fault, and maybe you should go and confess to your family that it's a chance that you killed your grandmother. And when you tell them, I'm so sorry, everyone, I killed grandma, and they say, oh my God, you killed grandma. And you say, yes, I was sleepwalking and I ate a cracker with butter and garlic, and I know that's why she's dead. Do you think your family's going to go, that makes a lot of sense? Or do you think your family might go, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Because let me ask you this, Love is 515. If you had a family member who said, I now know why Dad got a flat tire yesterday, it is because I ordered snow crab for appetizer. Would you say, well, that makes total sense, right? We know that when you eat snow crab for appetizer, that it causes flat tires in family members. There's of course, an absolute causality there between snow crab consumption and flat tires in family members. I'm betting Love is 5 and 5. You would not do that, but isn't it interesting that we have what we call, well, at least what I love to call specialness? The rules of the world apply to me differently than they do to everyone else, and I wouldn't blame anyone else for eating something and causing something bad, but I would myself, right? I hold myself to a different standard of rules, or the function of the universe somehow works differently for me than it does for other people. Alexander says, I'm currently going through brain zaps after getting, I think you meant off SSRIs, and it's been 2 months. It triggers my OCD. Any advice? I would go to your prescriber and ask your prescriber about that, because if there is a medication issue going on there or a withdrawal effect of it, then that would be something that you would want to really discuss with them to see what's going on, and maybe they would have something that they could help you with as you get through that. Ta says, is it better to do pre-planned exposures or try not to do compulsions for an upcoming situation with lots of OCD triggers? I think you could do a mix of both, honestly. I think that you can always prepare for things and do some pre-planned exposures to practice stuff, but also know that you're never going to practice 100%. You're never going to be able to absolutely predict how everything is going to go. So it is a possibility that things will happen that you won't have prepared for, that you're going to have to deal with, and know that you're going to want to just be ready for those things, right? As much as everybody hopes that, all right, I'm 100% ready and I'm 100% prepared, I've never met anyone who's been 100% ready or prepared for absolutely everything. So know that life will always throw some lemons at you, and you can be sour or you can make lemonade. Excuse me. Sneeze, and then see where it goes. So I think you do a little bit of both. Sad Doggy says, maybe we should call it weird OCD. I like that. I think it's magical thinking first. Let's see. Jay Winters, have you ever heard of Christians who left a very rigid denomination whose OCD symptoms got better? Yes, I have. And you say after they left. Yes, because when there's less rules that you're worried about following, it could become easier for you to be able to function in life because you're less afraid about maybe doing something wrong, being punished, an afterlife that you don't want or something like that. And it's not just Christians, right? It could be any religion or any faith or anyone. And typically more on the fundamentalist side, but not always. I've even heard of people who maybe have some very liberal faiths who decide, you know what, I just don't believe this anymore, and found that their life just seemed to be better for them once they stopped believing in things. Now, it's going to be a different experience for everybody, so there's not a right or wrong in this one here. It's just the way that it goes. Okay. Arc like addicts. For ERP, how does someone deal with the unbearable anxiety that follows? Do you just deal with it over time? It gets better and better. Well, first of all, I'd rather not have ERP have unbearable anxiety. I'd rather have ERP be feelings that are uncomfortable, but that we can tolerate. If it's unbearable, I would like to do some step downs on those ERPs to maybe some things that are a little bit easier to do first, and then build our way up to things that right now might feel unbearable, but hopefully later on aren't unbearable as you've worked your way up them. So maybe ArcLight, what you want to do first is try some things that are a little bit easier to do than the things that you're doing. And you might find that then it gets a little bit less difficult, not so unbearable for you, and you're able to function with it a little bit better. See how that goes. All right. Nose started running. Don't know what happened there. Kayla says, I've been struggling with contamination OCD and getting panic attacks because I will then believe I have been poisoned, drugged by a food. Well, Kayla, I wish I could guarantee that you have not been drugged or poisoned by a food. I can't guarantee that for yourself or anybody else. It would be nice if we could, but part of living in a world is living in a world of risks, living in a world of doubt, living in a world of uncertainty. Now, we can believe that we've been poisoned or drugged by food, but does that actually make us be poisoned or drugged by food? I believe that there is a ghost drilling into my head right now. Does it make it true that that is actually the case, right? So there's a difference between what I believe and what is actually happening. OCD likes to lean on the, well, if you believe it, it must be true, right? I mean, to OCD, these beliefs are amazingly great things to worry about. But OCD also won't take beliefs or faith as an answer to anything, right? It wants absolute 100% proof. So it wants proof that your food hasn't been drugged, it hasn't been poisoned. And if it can't get that, it'll say, well, maybe it's best just to not eat food, right? Because then you have no chance of being drugged or no chance of being poisoned. We wouldn't want that, though, because, well, we know that people die when they stop eating, and we wouldn't want that to occur. So, Kayla, if that's the case, I hope you'll reach out to somebody and look for some assistance. All right, I have to blow my nose. I'm going to go off camera and mute myself so you don't hear that for a second. I'll be right back. Much better. All right, so let's go to Becky. How do you handle general rumination and exhaustion from OCD? Every perceived error feels like the end of the world. My amygdala seems hypersensitive, and everything feels overwhelming. So, beauty. Oh, I said Becky. Sorry, beauty. Beauty hack. Let me ask you this: why hasn't the world ended yet? You used one of my favorite phrases here, which is feels like. And beauty hack, let me ask you this. What couldn't you justify with the phrase, it feels like, right? So if everything feels like the end of the world, but has never actually been the end of the world, why do you choose to believe that when it feels like the end of the world, that it is that overwhelming? It seems to me your feelings of this being the end of the world have led to absolutely nothing happening to the world whatsoever. So what is there to actually be afraid of? What should we actually be concerned about, right? Now you say your amygdala seems hypersensitive and everything feels overwhelming. What a great thing to do some ERP to, right? What are things that feel overwhelming, and how can you learn to handle those things without feeling overwhelmed by them, right? I'd be interested to know what those are. So I think if you're working with a therapist, you can create a list of these things, starting with lower level things and work up to higher level things. And you're able to really take a look at, all right, here's these overwhelming quote unquote things that seem to be happening in my life. But the reality, of course, is that the world has never ended from any of these things. And so what can I teach myself about these things? Yes, I know that this is my initial reaction to something, but do I have to trust that that's the only way to react? Could I just allow for that initial reaction, know it's going to be there, and then move on to another reaction? Is that possible? I think it is, right? I see people do this all the time who just know that, all right, when this occurs, I'm going to react this way. I accept that. And then after a minute or so, when I catch myself, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I don't need to go there. And then they're able to go do other things. And slowly over time, that reaction time that they feel that way just decreases and decreases and decreases till it might just be a little pink. And then it's like, oh, okay, never mind. And then they move on from that. That's what I would work on practicing Beauty Hack, is that very thing. Okay. Correlate says, I have a huge fear of my thoughts becoming true. How do I handle these thoughts without immediately becoming scared of the thoughts and trying to use phrases to disprove them? Well, we can use my usual example. I wish for the ceiling to collapse upon me right now. Come on, ceiling. Let's go. Fall down. Crush. Collapse. Correlate. Why didn't it happen? Why didn't my thought, why didn't my wish come true? And also, why wasn't I scared of it at the same time? Maybe one reason is I don't have OCD. And so therefore, when I have a thought like that, I react to it in a different way than somebody with OCD does. And if that's the case, then let's talk about how do people with OCD react to things? And what can we do to help people with OCD change the way they react to things? And it could be possible that the best way to help people who have OCD change the way they react to things is to do exposure and response prevention therapy. Right now, without purposely testing these things, you may think, I've just gotten lucky all the time because I've done compulsions, and it is compulsions that have kept me safe and stopped anything bad from happening. Would you be willing to challenge that? Would you be willing to say, you know what? I'm going to allow whatever thoughts are there. I'm going to feel the feelings. I'm not going to do anything to neutralize them. And I'm going to see, was it really worth the time and the effort and the energy to be so afraid of that thing? Or was that maybe some kind of misfire going on in my head? Something caused by OCD, shall we say, that led me to feel that way when the reality was I didn't need to feel that way at all. There was no reason for it. There was no purpose for it. Now, correlate. That isn't to say that I can tell you with 100% certainty that nothing bad will ever happen. I would never say that, right? Look at people who live as if something terrible or awful is definitely going to occur if they go and do something. They're no longer living their lives. They're living the lives that OCD wants them to live instead of living the life that they want to live. I liken this to the idea that you could spend the rest of your life sitting next to your tombstone wondering when you will be 6 feet under it, or you could party like a rock star for the rest of your life and on the day of your death show up at your tombstone and say, well, that was fun. We are going to end up under the tombstone one day. It's just, how do we get there? Do we get there by living life, having fun, enjoying it? Or do we get there by worrying and shutting ourselves down and pulling ourselves out of the world and away from things and just kind of keeping ourselves in this little box, hoping that that's going to protect us from everything? And then on the day of our death go, kind of sucks that I just spent the last 40 years worrying about this day without ever doing anything to get there. And some people might even say, well, if I do go out and I live life and then something happens to me, I won't live. And that's a choice, right? Would you rather live 40 years doing nothing or 20 years having a great time? I'll take 20 years having a great time personally. That's me. I'm not saying that's what anybody else should do, but that's where I would go, right? I'm going to do that. When I was watching my wife go through cancer and when she died, the hardest part was knowing that she wasn't going to get to enjoy things anymore the way that she used to, right? But that also didn't stop us from going out and doing things. Even though her immunity was compromised, she still wanted to go to the movies. So we did. In fact, 2 days before she had the final seizure, before that eventually led to the 2 weeks she was in the hospital, we went to see a movie. I'm thrilled we did that. That's one of the happy moments of my life, knowing that right before she died, she got to do the thing that she loved to do because it was something that she could do. We could go to the movie theater. We would get those seats in the big aisle there. There's usually like those 4 rows in the big aisle, then the aisles, and we'd get the handicapped seats. And there were always 2 that were together, and she'd get in one, I'd get in the other, and we'd situate her, and she could lay back so it was more comfortable for her and everything. And she had her walker or wheelchair, depending on how we could get there. And for a couple of hours, she was out of the house and got to enjoy things. I'm glad. And I would tell you this, even if something happened in that theater and that's what led to the seizure and that's what led her to die, I'm still glad we went to that movie, right? Because it was better than sitting around the house doing nothing. So I'll take that any day. And that is a memory that I like. Chelsea says, how can SSRIs stop the obsessions? I've been having really good days where I don't have the urge to do compulsions. It's not necessarily that I think they'll stop the obsessions. I think you will just have a better mood, right? One of the things the antidepressants do seem to potentially help with increased mood. And maybe with that increased mood, you're more nonchalant about those obsessions. And the urge to do those compulsions is not quite there anymore. And so therefore, there you go. You just maybe start to feel less concerned about what the obsessions are until you get to a point that, okay, not so great. Who cares? Beth says, that was along the lines of your magical thinking, right? Can't have certain ice cream in a certain place. You can. You choose not to, but you can. And I'm glad you like the crap jokes. That's good. Hey, it's SC. How would you suggest people maintain their romantic relationships during times of heightened OCD? I feel like this is something that's hard since you've been doing ERP with NOCD. Well, one of the things that I say is, if you're comfortable, bring your partner into a therapy session and work that out with your therapist so that you can actually have that conversation and talk about that very thing. Because it's all, to me, it's all on the table, right? If you want to maintain this relationship, it's not going to be maintained by secrecy. Right? I think it's going to be maintained by mutual trust and admiration and support. And if your partner could be supportive instead of a source of fear for you because you're afraid if they find out about the ERP and the OCD and all these things, maybe they'll leave you, and then that leads you to alienate yourself from them because you're worried about that. That's not going to be working toward your relationship. That's going to be working against your relationship. So I would just say, hey, what can you do to bring that partner in and make them a part of the treatment so that you can all work on this together and it's not a secret anymore. That's at your comfort level though, right? It's not mandatory. I'm not saying you have to do it, but I've seen it work very, very well in many therapy sessions I have done. Can we talk about derealization and its connection to OCD? Sometimes I feel like my reality isn't real. Even if I see the soap on my hands, I still don't see the soap on my hands. Yep. Well, OCD can definitely get you to doubt your senses, right? Your perception of things. And so I don't necessarily know that that's derealization. I wouldn't necessarily call it that. Derealization usually is kind of a pretty severe panic reaction to something to try to pull yourself consciously out of a situation that is so very uncomfortable that it's almost like a brain disconnect from your body type of experience. Now, in what you're describing, sometimes you feel like your reality isn't real. I see OCD be able to do this, right? Because OCD has lots of magical thinking, which would be where reality isn't really real. Where if you believe that eating, I'm going to go to Beth's example, eating a certain ice cream can cause someone to harm your family, I would say that's not really real. But OCD says, but what if it is? If you can lather up your hands and there's soap on them, but you still don't feel like you perceive it or you see it well enough, or you have such extreme doubt of it being there that, yes, you see it, but you can't really convince yourself that it's there, that, again, is something that OCD would absolutely do. OCD would go to do that. Why? Because OCD is doubt. And so if OCD can create doubt, that is what OCD is going to do. And look at what you're describing. You're describing, I doubt seeing the soap on my hands. I know it's there logically, but what do we know? The logic that we use in day-to-day life is different than the logic that OCD uses, because OCD has one more yeah, but what if, than we have a logical answer to. And therefore, we're not going to be able to be logical with OCD. Just ain't going to happen. Right? It's not how it works. Mary Beth says, your 26-year-old son has severe OCD and a kratom substance use disorder. Tried for Rogers, but they won't take him until he's off. So many OCD, SUD patients. Why are there no in- or outpatient programs to treat both? I know of a couple of places, at least from the outpatient, the intensive outpatient program and the partial hospital program at Alexian Brothers in Chicago. They have a program for substance use disorder and they have an anxiety disorder program, and they will do cross-tracking between the two programs. So that's one to check out. And I'm checking actually on the option of a residential for that. So I should have my answer to that tomorrow. Mary Beth, if you could ask this question again next week, that would be great. I would appreciate it. Sad Doggo says, you hate when I look at other people's compulsions and go, that's silly. Yeah, well, everybody does. I bet everybody on here would say the same thing. When your brain is literally compelling you to run and hide under tables, brain, you have no place to judge, right? Isn't it funny that brain will both judge and condemn and laugh and cry and do all these things at the same time, right? Many people with OCD still will say this very thing, and I hear this when I do groups all the time. Boy, I wish I had that kind of OCD because it would be so much easier to deal with than the one I have. And you're right, it would be. And the reason it would be is because you don't care about that one. You care about yours. Yours is different than those, right? And that's why you feel that way. That's why you have those thoughts and images and urges that you have versus the ones that everybody else has, because the ones you have are the things that are most important to you, and the ones they have are about the things that are most important to them. And therefore, why would why wouldn't you not care about theirs, right? Because theirs probably doesn't trigger anything for you the way yours does. So very often, the new person in group would always say, oh my gosh, I wish I had that kind of OCD. And everybody in group would pause and laugh and say, yeah, we all said that too. Jack says, in order to coexist with anxiety, does it help if we change our perception of it? That helps, yes. Most of us view it as a scary monster. Does thinking about it as an uncomfortable feeling help? Is this just a compulsion? Well, Jack, what I don't want you to do is have to try to figure out what to name it or call it or how it is or what it is or anything like that. What I do want you to do, Jack, is just to recognize this. Every person in the world, barring about 50 that we know of, because they have a certain condition that actually causes their amygdala to turn into a stone. It absorbs calcium and therefore it doesn't fire anymore because calcium is not an electrical system. And therefore they don't have an anxiety system. But turns out very dangerous, right? And the people in the world that have that are studied by a group of a very select few people, and they're never going to tell you the names of those people, and you couldn't even try to get them if you wanted to. You're very, very lucky if you'd ever get to interview one of them, but it would be through an anonymous source with no ability to recognize who they are or anything like that, because turns out you're in more danger living in a world without an anxiety system than you are living in a world with one. Because imagine this, crossing the street and a car coming at you and not having an anxiety reaction and having to think about, should I move or not? Versus, and just jumping and getting out of the way, right? So our anxiety system is actually a helpful thing. But for some people, it's overactive. And when you have people with OCD, trauma, and anxiety disorder, you have an overactive anxiety system. So what do you want to be able to do? You do want to exist with anxiety, right? And what maybe is happening is, and we think that this is probably pretty true, people with OCD react differently than people without OCD to the same thing. So as a person who treats OCD, who's been subjected to pretty much, every obsession of anyone I've ever treated and never once been bothered by any of them, if the obsessions in and of themselves were actually bad, awful, horrible, dangerous, I would be a mess. I would just be probably locked up in an institution at this point in time after hearing 26 years of obsessions. But I hear these obsessions and I go, wow, interesting. Oh, okay. Well, let's figure out a way to work on that. So are the obsessions actually scary? Do these thinking about these uncomfortable things actually cause harm to people? No. If they did, no one would even want to treat OCD, because the moment you started treating it, you would be subjected to it and it would overtake your life and you would just absorb all of these feared things. So the obsessions are not the problem. The problem is, as you say there, the perception, the interpretation, the reaction to it. And that reaction is the compulsion. You know, sometimes I do a talk with people, and if anyone's interested, I wrote a book called Don't Try Harder, Try Different. You can get a copy online if you're interested. But in there, I talk about the ideas of things in terms of very common themes that we see in anxiety and OCD. And I talk about the idea that everything is neutral and subject to the perception or interpretation that you put on it. So if I have an elevator in front of me and there's two other people with me, and one is a 4-year-old kid and one is a woman who works in an office building, and the elevator door opens, the 4-year-old kid runs and presses all the buttons. They're very excited. The woman gets in the office or into the elevator and she presses her button and she scornfully looks at the child because now they have to stop at a bunch of floors because the kid pressed all the buttons. And I, let's say, have an elevator phobia and I'm like, there's no freaking way I'm getting on that elevator, and I look for the stairs. Now, let me ask you this. How can 3 people experience the elevator and one find it to be exciting, one be indifferent to it, and one be afraid of it? How is it possible that one thing can cause 3 things? Or is the elevator in and of itself a neutral thing, and it is subject to the perception and interpretation of anybody experiencing it? And what does that mean? We want to say the elevator's frightening. We want to say COVID's frightening. We want to say eating a certain thing is frightening. The reality is, if those things were frightening, everybody in the world would be afraid of them. Those things are not frightening. Those things are not fun. Those things are subject to our perception or interpretation. That's what they are. And so this is why I can hear everything and not be bothered by it. because I interpret those things as OCD and give them no power whatsoever. But somebody with OCD hears them and thinks, yeah, but what if? And goes down that road and gives them tons of power. And therefore, they get very stuck in those things. And that's what seems to be happening. So, yeah. Let's see. So, okay, there we go. Let's see. Here we go. I have a serious health-related OCD with panic attacks and have been in the ER 30 times. I have a huge problem with hyperfixating on thoughts that I'm dying, like strokes, etc. What can I do? I feel crazy. Maybe this is where you want to consider higher level of care, like a partial hospital program or even a residential treatment center, who will help you get through these things without running to the ER as a way to check on them. You might also enjoy watching Ethan Smith's talk that he gave several years ago when he was the keynote speaker at the OCD conference, and he talked all about his health-related anxiety and how it led him to get brain scans. There's even a great comedian out there right now, and let me get you her last name. Bridget. I'm just blanking on Bridget's last name, but let me look it up. But Bridget talked about convincing her physician to give her HIV medication, even though she did not have HIV at all, right? But she did convince her doctor to give her that medication. And she's doing a one-person show now about it. And I'm going to get you her name because you will, I think, very, very much enjoy it. And she has very, very good, a very, very good show. I've watched it. It's excellent. And I'm excited to go and see it too. So let me just pull up that calendar. There it is. Bridget McGuire, she will be at Zany's in Rosemont, Illinois on September 11th. Check out Bridget McGuire. And again, she will describe her living with OCD. And again, she's a person who did actually convince a physician to give her antiviral HIV medication, even though she did not have HIV, right? And that is the level that OCD will go to, right? But because OCD can know the truth and says, yeah, but what if? And still go into that. Linda says, my fears come up as here now the present government has changed in negative ways. You're perceiving disaster. Your family had to run from Nazis. Some perished having to live through that regime. Linda, one of the things I think about is how we can have family history in some of these things and how that influences us. I remember Jerry Springer, even though, way out there, of course, on many things, but he did one of his shows about, had some Nazis on the show, and it was one of those where, chairs were flying and fights and all these kinds of things. And then he always did his little thing at the end. And it was amazing, actually, because he just talked about his father had a car, an old car that he kept in the backyard. And it was next to the garage, and it was facing out toward the alley. And Jerry said, Dad, why do you have this car? This is so stupid. I can't believe, it's an eyesore and everything like that. And his dad said to him one day, they came for us once and we weren't ready. I'll never not be ready again. And I just thought, wow, what a powerful, powerful thing, right? So, yes, we can be influenced by cultural things. We can be influenced by religious things. We can be influenced by political things. OCD loves a stressor, right? And so if we perceive that something is a stressor, OCD is going to jump on that thing. Fem Thunder says, you're in NOCD therapy, you're improving with ERP. Woohoo! Any tips for how to sit with, I want to change that to live with anxiety during ERP without running the therapy through rumination and self-reassurance? Yes. Well, one of the things that I like to do is sometimes even create loop tapes that I have people listen to while they're doing ERP, and it will say little things like, this is going to fail, I am not going to survive this, and all these things. And just also do that when you're not doing ERP and just listen to that. And what you will find, I believe, is that that just becomes background noise after a while, right? Kind of like my tinnitus, which is really loud right now because I just said tinnitus and boom, and you hear John Grace and I talk about our tinnitus all the time if you listen to. But it's always in the background, but I'm not always hearing it. And I think that you can get to that point too with the things that kind of run through your head. Anybody with rumination or something like that. I have people take their ruminations, make a tape out of them, listen to them over and over, just on a loop. And after a while, people become so bored with it. Like, can I stop listening? No, it's so stupid. It's like, no, listen to it for a few more hours, right? Because when you go to do this on your own, I want you to be like, oh my God, that's so dumb. Who cares? Whatever. And just be able to move away from it and not so overwhelmed by it. So I think that that's something that I work with people on for sure. Correlate says, thanks for your words. Your ceiling example made me laugh a lot. Oh, good. About your own thoughts. Sorry for your loss. Glad you got to spend an amazing time with her during that time. Yes. Well, here's the thing. I lived with someone who was dying for 6 years. And my attempt was always to try to do what we could to make it the best experience possible. Living with OCD is living with the thing in your head that tells you, you're about to die or something awful or horrible or terrible is about to happen unless you do this thing. And then you do that thing and then it says, all right, oh, but then now what if it happens again, right? I kind of use that example of like a flywheel or a hamster wheel of hell, right? Don't think about this thing. So now you're thinking about it. And your thing is like, oh, and it gets worse and worse to the point of, all right, you want to get rid of that? Here, you have to do this. And you keep doing this and doing this until it feels like you've done it just right. And finally you do it till it feels like you've got it right. And it says, okay, good job. Now remember, don't think about that again. And brr, there we go. And then brr, there we go. And then, and that's what your life is just like, right? You're just stuck on this hamster wheel of hell because you're spending all this time doing things to satisfy something that's unsatisfiable, that you're never going to satisfy, that is always going to want you to do more. And you keep wondering, why can't I overcome this? Well, you're never going to overcome OCD by doing more compulsions. Not one person in the history of the world who has OCD has ever done enough compulsions for OCD to go, hey, great job, I'm out of here. That's just never happened. It's never going to happen. And if you think it's going to happen, I have many bridges to sell you in many places, and I'll give you a good deal on them, I promise, right? So that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to satisfy OCD whatsoever. Linda says you have relationship OCD. Sometimes you feel like your relationship is really unhealthy and not one you should be in, and your fear is actually breaking up. Would conquering your fear actually mean breaking up? Conquering your fear would mean living with your relationship OCD and the doubts that you have about a relationship, and recognizing that just because those are there doesn't mean they're true or real. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to stay in a relationship that's not good for you. And it doesn't mean that you have to break up with a relationship that you really are enjoying. It's weird, right? What it really does mean is, how do you allow yourself to recognize that you have obsessions about a relationship? Oh, maybe because you're doing compulsions to neutralize them, right? And people who have issues with relationships aren't doing compulsions. They're sitting there, they're trying to figure it out, they're weighing the pros and cons, they're making decisions, they're taking actions, and they're doing things. People with relationship OCD aren't moving forward or backward. They're stuck, right? Because all they're doing is having obsessions and then doing compulsions and doing more compulsions and seeking more and more reassurance, maybe even alienating their partner. And then because of the reassurance, and then when their partner gets frustrated, they're like, oh shit, now they're mad at me. And then they do more compulsions and everything like that. And they probably just notice that it kind of just exponentially grows in these types of situations. So This, I think, is where you want to bring in a therapist and your partner into the discussion so that you all have some chance to work this out together. I think that would be great. Beth says, I like this, Beth. This is the most hopeful thing I've heard you say. You guess you're just thinking at some point you'll get tired of hiding and go out at some point. How about tomorrow, Beth? Tomorrow sounds like a good day to do that. Danny C. says, how to prevent engaging in compulsions with intrusive memories popping to your head that feel like evidence of something deeper. Danny, you used the phrase. I was going to talk about it a little bit earlier, and then I got distracted into something else, but I'm going to talk about it now. Feel like evidence. So Danny, feel like evidence. Is that actually evidence, or does it feel like evidence? I said it a little bit earlier, or I did talk about it slightly. Danny, I feel like a ghost is drilling into my head right now and sucking my brain out through a straw. Is it happening? It feels like it. Danny, is that enough for it to be true, that it feels like it's happening? If I tell you that it feels like it's happening, Danny, will you go, well, it must be real. It must be true. And Danny, I sneezed earlier. Maybe that's because the drill's going up my nose. That feels like evidence to me then, Danny. The sneeze seems to be and really feels like evidence that there is a ghost drilling into my brain, actually through my nose, though. And that was the sneeze is proof of it. So, Danny, we now have evidence, it feels like, that a ghost is actually drilling into my head because of the sneeze. So, Danny, how much do you believe that to be true? And if you don't believe it to be true, I don't know why you'd believe anything else that feels like evidence to be true also. Do you have any techniques how to stop rumination? Sometimes the thoughts get so sticky it's hard to get out of my head. Again, I love the loop tape. Big fan of that. Big fan of just allowing the ruminations to be there and sometimes even just letting them play in the background over and over and over until you're so bored with them that you don't care. One of my favorite exercises I ever did was working with somebody who had social anxiety, and she was so afraid of all the things that her sisters used to tease her about, and she had these like 10, 15 phrases that ran through her head all the time that she constantly beat herself up with. So we just made a loop tape of them, and we had her listen to them for 5 hours. After 3 hours, she said, I'm starting to get bored with this. After 4 hours, she was begging to stop the tape. I said, 1 more hour. And after 5 hours, she said, I can't believe these phrases have ever bothered me. They're the stupidest things in the world. I don't care anymore. I'm going to live my life. I said, that's wonderful. Show of hands, do we have to believe everything that pops into our head? Raise your hand for yes. Okay. I don't know if you all remember this, but about a year ago, I said, this will be my last webinar. And the reason that this will be my last webinar is because I'm going to hope after the webinar to be the only person left alive. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to clear highways of cars. And then I'm going to go to where there's supercar dealers, and I'm just going to drive Lamborghinis and Ferraris and McLarens and whatever other cool, awesome cars that I can find. And I'm just going to drive them up and down highways at just amazingly high rates of speed and just enjoy driving all by myself without anybody else being on the highways or around. Now, that was my thought. And then I came back again next week for the webinar. So it appears just because I think something doesn't make it true. So how much do I have to worry about my thoughts? Trichotillomania, you've been living with it since teens. You're over 70. Good thing, Linda, at NOCD, we work on trichotillomania. So you can do habit reversal training for trichotillomania. And we would be happy to help you with that. So check us out at NOCD.com if that's the case. Damien says, any advice for someone without access to OCD therapists? We do teletherapy across the world, Damien, so check us out. Reach out to us at nocd.com. Let's see if there's something we can do for you. Yes, I like that. You shouldn't let OCD run your life, says Old Wolf of Farron. Apply that to yourself too, just making sure that you do that. All right. That would be awesome. Hey, it's a C says, thank you for that. I'm open about my journey with your partner, but mean more so how to maintain, hold on when all of your thoughts want you to do is let go. Doing ERP feels like it's making it hard. ERP is harder at first, right? It is hard at first. And in fact, doing good ERP very often means it feels worse at first before it gets better. So when somebody says to me it feels like it's not working or it's getting worse, I often say, that's awesome. That means we're really hitting something. So I would say work on sticking through it and make sure you bring that up with your therapist and your partner all the time. Chelsea, I'm new to NOCD. Do you have live Q&A every Wednesday? Oh, Chelsea, you've not been here for the last 5 years of Wednesdays, obviously, where I do this all of the time with these wonderful people. So yes, and you can go to our NOCD YouTube channel as well, and you can check out all the old episodes if you want. They're all there, so that would be fun to have you in. Welcome, Chelsea. We're happy to have you here. Danny says, thank you. Your brain keeps hopping between wanting to review different memories and feels like you're constantly trying to convince yourself that you're not an irredeemable person. You're trying not to engage. That's great. Keep working on that. And even if you do engage, allow yourself to recognize that just because you think something doesn't mean it's true. Brett, does NOCD help with agoraphobia? Absolutely. We will treat agoraphobia because agoraphobia can be treated very well with exposure and response prevention therapy also. So yes, feel free to reach out for that. You're also curious if we're skilled in working with severe dissociation. It seems like could really interfere if someone is always detaching themselves surroundings emotions. One of the things that we'll do is something called interoceptive exposures. Very often people with these kind of derealizations, dissociations, depersonalizations have a lot of panic experiences, and that panic gets so bad that that's what feels like a severe dissociation or derealization. So we can do work on panic and see if maybe that helps to deal with some of the derealization or dissociation as well. Chelsea says, LOL, you just got diagnosed, so it's nice to have a community that understands. It's very lonely. Make sure you download the NOCD app as well. It's the largest community of people with OCD in the world, and you can join the community right there. So that would be great to have you on there also. And Carlette says, you're new too. You had no idea these lives are so frequent. Good. Well, we're just so glad that you're on the app and you're wondering what it was and you're excited to be here more. We'd love you to be here more. Everybody's welcome, right? Bring your friends, bring your family. Everybody's allowed to ask questions, and that would be great. Let's see. Darla said, is Stacey going to be back soon? I hope so. Stacey's had some stuff going on, so I was communicating with her tonight. So she's doing a couple of things with her job and work and things. So we'll see. But she's always invited. She knows that. So well, I'll let her know you were thinking about her, Darla, for sure. What's the best way to get rid of unwanted thoughts? Tell yourself not to think them. No, I'm kidding. Boy, if only that worked. That would be great. Chris, the best way to work on getting rid of unwanted thoughts is, first of all, not care that you're having the thoughts. And you do that by practicing and allowing the thoughts to be there without doing compulsions or things to get rid of them. So, you know what? There's kind of a trick question here because you say, what's the best way to get rid of unwanted thoughts? And my answer is going to be by accepting that they're there and allowing them to be there and moving on and living your life even though they're there. That's actually the way to get rid of them because after a while, hopefully you don't care so much about them. But Chris, the more activity, the more action you take to try to get rid of a thought, the more it will stick. For example, don't think of a pink elephant, Chris. Don't picture a pink elephant in your head. Have no pink elephant thoughts whatsoever, Chris. Just don't think of a pink elephant. Stop thinking of pink elephants. Don't get a pink elephant in your head. Boy, is it hard not to think of a pink elephant when you're telling yourself not to think of a pink elephant, isn't it? But maybe you think about triangles. Maybe you think about circles. Maybe you think about, the aquarium where there's probably not a lot of pink elephants. And by doing that, things start to maybe focus on other stuff, right? So if you're trying to make a thought go away, you're pretty much guaranteeing that it will stick around. OCD lies to you and says, do this compulsion to make this thought go away and then all will be well. That's a lie because all that does is keep the thought around. But what happens in OCD? People with OCD fall for OCD, right? They believe what OCD tells them, which is just a line of bullshit, unfortunately, but people believe it anyway. And so we want you to not believe what OCD says because OCD is a liar, right? Let's see. Would it be possible for NOCD to supplement existing weekly ERP? You're interested in NOCD groups and resources. NOCD groups, just so you know, are open for people who are doing NOCD therapy. So if you're interested in some of the work that we do, then we're doing those things because they're just part of the NOCD therapy experience. So, but anybody doing NOCD therapy, you have access to our support groups. But if you're not in NOCD, you always have access to the app and you have access to the community. And we are always happy to have you there if that's the case. All right, everyone. Well, before we go, just keep in mind that if you're looking for help for OCD or related conditions, you can check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com, where we're always happy to chat with you. Our team is standing by to take your call, or you go online and go through the online platform also. We are proud to be the largest online platform for obsessive compulsive disorder in the world, and our therapists are trained in doing evidence-based treatments for OCD and hoarding and body-focused repetitive behaviors and tics and depression and anxiety disorders, and we are standing by to help. So we will see you again in a week because we're here every Wednesday. Welcome to our new folks that were here tonight. Keep coming back. We have lots of fun. Until next week, as Dee says, good night and thank you, doctor. Oh, and I'm the doctor. Never mind. But thank you, Dee. That was awesome. All right, everybody. Have a good one. Be good to yourselves. At least better than your OCD is